My name is Carter Ham. I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Vice President here at the Association for the United States Army on behalf of our President, General Gordon Sullivan, who couldn't be here tonight. Welcome to AUSA's Conference and Events Center. General Hartzog asked me, says, where is General Sullivan? I spoke with him yesterday. He's at Fort Benning, where they are currently conducting the Sullivan Cup, competition of tank crews from across the United States and also from Canada this year as well. General Hartzog asked, what's he doing? What's he doing down there? And so when I spoke with him yesterday, he said he was doing exactly the same thing that he did 50 years ago. He was standing on a tank range waiting for something to happen. So sometimes things don't change so much. We are indeed very honored that you join us tonight for a very special event, AUSA's Soldiers of Valor lecture, and our distinguished guest will be interviewed by General Stroop in just a moment. AUSA is proud to participate as a Vietnam commemorative community. AUSA and 41 of our chapters are Vietnam commemorative communities, and we're very happy to have been engaged in this effort from the very beginning. And I would recognize that the chair of that commission is here tonight, Major General Jim Jackson. General Jackson, welcome. Glad to have you here. I learned a long time ago, when you stand in front of a group like this, you're supposed to acknowledge all the dignitaries. We would be here till about 2300 if I did that. And I learned a very clever thing. As I was bouncing around in Africa in my last tour on active duty, the Africans have a way to fix all this. When you have a large and distinguished group such as this with many individual dignitaries, the Africans say simply, all protocol observed. And everybody is happy. So tonight, all protocol observed. I am, however, going to very rudely call out two individuals. And while we are here tonight to remember and think about and honor those who served in Vietnam, we are honored tonight to have two veterans who served not only in Vietnam, but in Korea and in World War II as well. General Croson and General Treffry. Thank you both. And lastly, in terms of individual recognition, Command Sergeant Major Jimmy Spencer, who is a senior fellow here at AUSA, also serves on General Jackson's panel. Sergeant Major Spencer, always glad to have you. And I'm glad that you are providing adult supervision to Sergeant Major Thomas, who needs that on a frequent basis. AUSA's support for this, for the Vietnam commemorative effort will continue. We did last year at AUSA's annual meeting host a panel. We will do so again this coming year. We think that this is an important way to remember those who served in an important campaign and an important effort for our nation that is unfortunately all too often forgotten. So we're glad that you are assembled here tonight. Again, welcome, and I'd be glad to turn the podium over to General Ted Stroop. General Stroop. Thank you, sir.
General Ham, I don't want to correct your military history, but I do want to put a footnote on my several trips to China. I learned that historically it was the Chinese Army that introduced the protocol. Just a minute. Oh, that's our dogs calling. And Zinga, thank you for calling me. Now, the reason I did that was that if you have mobile phones, heart-paced devices, or anything else that vibrates, with respect to our speaker, please turn it off. Thank you, Nzinga, for calling me. Well, Thank you for coming. It's in the warm-up session, it was just wonderful to see the friends and professional compatriots that have served with our distinguished speaker tonight. And I thank you for coming, and if you've not had a chance to grip and grin with him, please do so. And as General Ham mentioned tonight, our Soldiers of Valor lecture series is part of our national campaign headquarters of participating with General Jackson and the nation's Vietnam 50th commemoration. Numbers and places and dates stand out when you look at history. That's even more important when you reflect back on military history, whether you have been part of participating in military history as a service member. But it's important that those events be remembered. The Battle of Hastings, 1066. Trenton, New Jersey, 1776. Gettysburg, 1863. Pearl Harbor, 7 December, 1941. D-Day, 6 June, 1944. And besides places, dates, and numbers, you have units and personalities. You have Patton's Third Army. Everybody that served in World War II, with the exception of General Crozon and General Treffry, that I have met, were in Patton's Third Army. You have the Screaming Eagles of the 101st. You also have Custer's and Hal Moore's 7th Cav at two distinct geographical locations when the Army was out doing things. And you have Rudder's Rangers, and of course I have to say that as a Texas Aggie, at Pointe-au-Hoc in France on D-Day. We, collectively, as members of the military, also share history with a Special Forces detachment, Alpha 276, an A-team. An A-team that was in Vietnam at Camp Nong Dong, that was there for a 6-month period, and on 6th July 1964, they experienced what was then become known as the Battle of Nong Dong. In addition to numbers and dates and units that I've recited, it's the soldiers that participate in those events that stand out and make history live. Tonight, we have the honor and privilege to listen to an American soldier who's from upstate New York, who spent the majority of his adult life serving our nation and our Army in uniform, at home and deployed. He served in the triad of our profession, infantry, special forces, and as a foreign area officer. He served with a number of you in different overseas locations. His story, his life, his contributions in war and peace for our country place him in the foremost front ranks of our distinguished soldiers and citizens. After Army retirement, our speaker continued to serve the nation in distinguished positions and positions of service to community and to the military. So please join me tonight to welcome our speaker, Colonel Roger Donlon, Infantry, to our podium. Sir.
Thank you very kindly, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
My phone's on silent.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I have to thank AUSA for getting us all gathered here tonight. As I thought about this gathering tonight and the association with the Army, my personal association is just a little over 82 years. General Crozon is looking at me and saying, "What's this guy talking about, 82 years associated with the Army?" Daddy was in World War I. All my 4 brothers served, my uncles. Our sons have served. So my entire life I've been associated with the Army. But I want to say thank you for the association tonight, General Ham, for what you have done, what you continue to do, and what we expect you to do in the future. You've been the catalyst. You made us all very proud to be a member of this great team. I'm especially excited to be in presence of General Croson. The Army magazine has many of his writings. I put General Croson in the same list with Guy S. Malloy, Aubrey S. Newman, Flywheel Flanagan, other contributors of Army magazines. And the association continues to do a magnificent job in getting the word out, what we've done in the past, in a manner that encourages and inspires those of the now generation to accept the responsibility to lean forward in the foxhole when called upon. Norma's giving me a little evil eye right now. She says, "Get to the script, Roger." It's with a deep sense of humility that I find myself here tonight with you as we commemorate the service of our armed forces during the Vietnam War and honor all those that served during that period. It was 52 years ago when Special Forces Team A726 arrived in Nam Dong, in Vietnam. We all had good intentions as advisors. We're going to advise, assist, and train the Vietnamese. Go into the villages and make friends. Yes, even help heal the sick. Rules of engagement at that time certainly didn't paint us as merciless killers. We were prepared to use our weapons when necessary. And I hesitate for a moment because the rules of engagement at that time were pretty strict. And for us young guys at that time, we thought we were pretty stupid. We were told that we couldn't shoot until we were shot upon. I think I have to make a public confession today. I had my medic go into the villages and find the guy who had the poorest eyesight and most years on his bones. And from our impress fund, made a financial contribution to him that he would test fire his weapon the earliest part of the day in my direction. Some of you picked up immediately on that. At sunrise, I was fired upon, so the rest of the day was fair game. Didn't have to hesitate. Camp Nam Dong lay in the jungle-clad mountains near the Laotian border. This camp was a major impediment to the further infiltration of the North down the Ho Chi Minh Trail from Laos into Vietnam. It was on the night of 6 July 64 that we came under a fierce attack. What made the attack significant was it was the first time that the regular forces from the North joined the Viet Cong in an effort to overrun the Special Forces outpost with a reinforced battalion of some 800 or 900 strong. They were determined to eliminate our camp by killing or capturing all. I'll not go into the details of that battle fought that night. Many of you know all those details. I would, however, rather like to take a few moments, give you a snapshot of the men who fought at Nam Dong and the pride in what they take for accomplished. Today, there are 6 survivors of Nam Dong. Allow me to introduce them briefly. Jay Olenichak was our executive officer, better known as Lieutenant O, graduate of West Point in the class of 61. Wounded during the battle, he tied his broken bones of his foot together with his bootlaces, hoping to stop the bleeding and hold the bones together. Guts, common sense, and courage defined Jay. Jay retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel after proudly returning to his alma mater, where he became distinguished editor of the Assembly magazine of the Association of Graduates. He is now fully retired and lives in Durham, North Carolina with his wife Sylvia. Mike Disser, combat engineer, demo expert. He was our youngest member of our team. Grew up as an Army brat, wounded at Nam Dong, in what was later known as the death pit. He batted grenades coming in as if they were mosquitoes. At one point of the battle where I'd been blasted out of my boots, I recalled that Mike had the same size feet that I had. So I slipped by his mortar pit. He wasn't going to be using his boots the rest of the night, and he was assigned to that pit. Need your boots, Mike. He threw them to me. You heard about having good friends give your shirt off your back. Well, Mike gave me his boots. Got us through that night. He served a second tour after he'd been commissioned in Vietnam, rose to the rank of captain. Had a distinguished civilian career in sales, computers, and real estate. Mike now lives with wife Judy, moving from Georgia into Tennessee. Thurman Brown was our most experienced combat soldier on our team. Brownie earned his first Purple Heart in Korea, also served in Okinawa, the Philippines, Thailand, previous tour in Vietnam. At one point of the battle, a loudspeaker announced they were there to take the Americans. Lay down your weapons. Got to Brownie, asked him if he got a beat on that. I had full confidence what Brownie was doing. The next broadcast, and I'll go to my grave picturing Brownie on his mortar with the Viet Cong on the other outpost saying, lay down your weapon, as he put a mortar round down his megaphone. Brownie was awesome. He still is. Brownie was off the radar for many years. We lost him, but a few years ago, in 2014, Norma and I had the wonderful opportunity to have a reunion with Brownie and his wife. They live in Georgia. Mary and Brown have a beautiful, large family. Ray Witzel, previously served in the Marine Corps. Came with his top physical condition, quiet, self-motivated, skilled engineer and demo sergeant. The backstory on Ray, he was the only African American on our team. Going through our training, there was a time where some of the team members said, we don't know if he's going to fit. He's too quiet. He's always got his nose in the field manual. He's a loner. Getting to know Ray, I found out why he left the Marine Corps. We reflect what a state affairs were in our country in the 60s. The Marine Corps, much like the Army and others, our whole society was having great racial problems. Ray wanted to serve. He didn't see that he was going to be able to serve the way he would wish to do in the Marine Corps. So he left the Corps and he said he heard about this new outfit called Special Forces in the Army. I'm going to become a Special Forces trooper. He came with that in his heart, on his mind. We all got to know that. Came to respect him very much. During that battle that night, Ray was in a mortar pit. He got isolated. I made it to the pit, finally. He took a beat on me, almost got me, he thought I was one of the out-of-towners. We got in there to help him out. Looked at me and he said, damn, Captain, I thought you were going to let my black ass die out here. We didn't let that happen. Ray came back, got him off to OCS, commissioned, retired as a young field grade officer, and after 20 years, went into business and retired in North Carolina. Min Win, We consider Min one of our team. He was one of our interpreters. He lost his hearing during the war. When Saigon fell, and as he often stated, when America abandoned us, Min caught a ride on a boat to England, where he remained some 25 years. When he got word that his father was on his deathbed in California, his family called him home. He came home and stayed, and he worked for a Vietnamese language newspaper. One day, the newspaper gave him the mission of translating an interview that was taken that day, earlier that day, about Nam Dong. When he was given that mission, he ran out into the editor's office, excitedly wrote a note to the editor. "Why didn't somebody tell me my captain was here?" You guessed it, there was a very emotional reunion followed. Min now is a U.S. citizen, has a hearing restored with a cochlear implant, and lives in Westminster, California. There are 5 surviving Nam Dong, but have died since then. Include Vernon Beeson, yes, another quiet soldier. B was our operations intel NCO. He operated with a calm demeanor at all times, no matter what the condition was. He was a dynamo of a man who saw combat in Korea. He awarded the Purple Heart there. He also served tours of duty in Germany. Before Nam Dong, that night, he and his men, his Nungs, were completely cut off from the rest of the team. They took a fierce shelling, and somehow, miraculously, none were wounded. When the Marine helicopter squadron flew overhead, then departed, and then came back a second time in the morning when daylight returned, B was on the radio. It was after my arrival at the hospital. There was a Marine colonel that came to me and said, "Captain, that sergeant you had on the ground was the calmest individual under those circumstances I ever heard." That was B. He was the last member of our team that left the battlefield, not doing so until he was ordered. When he passed away some years ago, he's now buried in High Point, North Carolina. Tom Gregg, he was our friendly medic in residence at that time. He had a busy night at Nam Dong in the trenches and behind the cinder blocks, all while disregarding the incoming fire that was raining around him. He tended to the wounded until all his medical supplies ran out. Total professional to the end. He became a physician's assistant upon return from Vietnam, and then served 3 consecutive tours before he retired at CW3, 29 years of service. He was instrumental in retirement in the development and certification of the very first hospital-based rural health clinic in the state of Texas. Tom is buried in Rising Star, Texas. As I shared earlier with one of the attendees tonight, who I met in Stuttgart many years ago, I was there participating proudly with the junior ROTC program. In the receiving line, one of the young cadets came up and he coined me, which certainly surprised me, being coined by a junior ROTC cadet. Turned out to be Tom Gregg's grandson. His sergeant major put him up to it. Hats off to good old sergeant majors. Terry Turin, our assistant medic, a Native American heritage from Arizona. He spent most of the night crisscrossing among the pits and treating the wounded until he, too, was hit. He refused evacuation. Terry was medically retired, discharged from the Army, the result of his wounds. He passed away in 1997 and is buried in Flagstaff, Arizona. Keith Daniels was a communications sergeant. Small, quiet, strong man who had previously served in Okinawa. The NVA and the Viet Cong had a bead superintelligence on our camp. They knew exactly when and where everything was. Within the first 2 minutes, they eliminated all our external communications capabilities. Within those 2 minutes, Dan, on his own initiative, got the only one message out to higher headquarters on what our situation was. That resulted in the Marine Chopper Squadron making an attempt to come in, but saw the situation on the ground such that they just went back, refueled, and came back in daylight to offer assistance. Dan died in Enterprise, Alabama, just a few years ago. Merwin Woods had prior service in the Navy. He stood 6'3", was the big man on our team, always in good spirits. Woody had previously served in Korea as well. At Nam Dong, he fought the battle of his life in his undershorts and earned his Purple Heart there. He retired after 23 years, and he took to sea in the USA on his Honda three-wheeler with his wife Desi in the sidecar. Woody died 6 years ago. He's buried in Kenton, Illinois. Dr. Jerry Hickey. Dr. Jerry Hickey was a renowned anthropologist who had authored what we at that time in the early 60s referred to as the Special Forces Bible, in preparing our area study, the Vietnam Village. 3 days before the battle, he had arrived in our camp to do follow-on research from his graduate days at the University of Michigan he did in 1958, particularly to do studies on the Nung Montagnard tribe. When Doc Hickey arrived, we all thought God had arrived. The man that knew the country, the culture, the languages, and about 7 dialects of the Montagnards. He boosted our confidence. He, as a young man, had served as a young Marine in end of World War II. He made it through the battle unscathed. He had a collective of 15 years in Vietnam. And those of you that want a unique perspective on Vietnam history through an anthropologist's eyes, I recommend Dr. Hickey's readings and writings. 5 authored books. Shattered Nations is one of them. Passed away and rests in the great classroom of heaven. Great, great person. Warrant Officer Kevin Conway of Australia joined our team as a welcome addition. Kevin was an experienced guerrilla fighter who had served not only in Korea, but he'd gone up guerrillas in Malaysia. When the first rounds of the battle started, Kevin was into the mortar pit and took one of the earliest rounds and died almost instantly. He was the first Australian to be killed in action in Vietnam. These were the unknown warriors of Nam Dong, with experience from Australia, from the Marines, from the Navy, from the Air Force, all with experience in 3 of our country's recent wars. We resolved to stand by one another. We had nothing to offer but our blood and our sweat, and if necessary, our tears. We were ready to wage war with all our might, all our strength that God had given us. We would not yield to the overwhelming odds of the might against us. We would never surrender. Our goal was victory. Olin Isaac, Brown, Disser, Terran were awarded the Silver Star. Beeson, Daniels, Gregg, Witzel, Woods were awarded the Bronze Star with Valor. 9 were awarded the Purple Hearts. They were soldiers of valor. After the award of the Medal of Honor at the White House, the Army sent me off on a tour throughout the country. There was a seemingly endless succession of personal appearances, interviews, speeches, special events. And as you can see, it has lasted over 52 years now. It was just 1 year into my new lifestyle, juggling my Army duties with numerous engagements I was asked to participate in on a regular schedule. On one, I met a young widow. Her husband, John Irving, had been killed in Vietnam. She was one of 18,000 names on the wall who left behind the love of their lives. 18,000 widows are represented there. She was not interested in another career soldier and managed to hold me at bay for 3 years before I convinced her to marry me. Let me introduce you to one extraordinary woman, a soldier's widow, a soldier's wife, a soldier's mother, my Norma. Would you please stand, Norma? Thank you kindly. We all can attest the strength we gain on the battlefield and off that we gain from our loved ones. When I retired from the Army, after nearly 33 years of service, Norma and I began to think of ways that we could help to reconcile the Vietnam War. It was Norma that approached me, reminding me, saying, you know, Roger, it's those of us who have invested the most in the war that should be the first to reach out in peace. That also became a calling for me. And it was in 1993, before diplomatic relations had been fully established, that Norma and I had the pleasure and privilege to lead the first mission and understanding for people-to-people international education and cultural exchange program established by President Eisenhower to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Both of us felt at that time that normalization relations was the right time, the right thing to be doing. For us to put the past in its proper perspective, to heal the wounds of war with our former adversaries. We wanted to build a bridge of understanding through education for both the Vietnamese in Vietnam as well as the Vietnamese here in America. We were successful in raising enough funds to eventually place our endowment at the Vietnam Center at Texas Tech. It has provided for years and will continue to provide scholarships, not only here in the United States, but in the Medical College of Can Tho in Vietnam. We also were able to send young Vietnamese Americans on summer interns to Vietnam so that they had a better awareness and understanding of the country and the culture of their parents. It was during this 1993 trip to Vietnam I was able to revisit our old camp at Nam Dong. I found the graveyard where my loyal Vietnamese soldiers were buried. It was abandoned and neglected. Knowing that the Vietnamese culture believed that the soul never rests under such conditions, I vowed to return and make the burial ground right. My reconciliation clock began to tick. 2 years later, I was able to return again with funds to resurrect, reconstruct the cemetery, together With former adversaries, we uprighted the headstones and held a ceremony with a wreath donated by soldiers from the North. Sometime later, I was approached by an organization called Children's Library International, who wanted to build the first Special Forces library at Nam Dong. Norman and I joined in that project. We were both surprised and most pleased to learn that when representatives from that organization arrived to inquire if they would be interested to have such a library constructed at Nam Dong, they were greeted by the local elders asking, "We wondered when you were coming, and here is the first $10,000 in U.S. cash as seed money to get the project off the ground." Needless to say, we were amazed and pleased. The project began, and I was honored to attend the dedication in December of 2011. Today it has many books in the library, and it also has a dozen computers, printers, and fax machines that last year was donated with funds from Bill and Melissa Gates Foundation. The children at Nam Dong today are now connected to the world. Their parents and grandparents communicated knocking on bamboo poles to get the signal across the valley 50 years ago. Last year, Norma and I again traveled to Vietnam, possibly for the last time. We went to renew our friendship with the first Vietnamese officer from the North to attend the U.S. Army Command General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth since the end of the war, Major Win Chung. During that year of sponsorship of this young officer, he brought much joy and a lasting friendship for both of us and for both our families. The other reason we went back to Vietnam was to help with the Australian documentary film about the Aussies who had served with Americans during Vietnam. When Kevin Conway, who I had mentioned earlier, was killed at Nam Dong, his family told his favorite niece, 13 years old, Kathy, that Uncle Kevin would not be coming home again. She never knew the circumstances of his death until she became an adult. We met on the battlefield at Nam Dong and walked together as I was able to tell the story of her Uncle Kev and of his short time on our team, A726, and of his supreme sacrifice on that fateful night at Nam Dong. Kathy was also able to visit the Children's Library during this visit, which stands proudly in the village to honor the memory of Warrant Officer Kevin Conway and his two American comrades, Master Sergeant Gabe Alamo, Sergeant John Houston, all of whom were killed at Nam Dong. Next month, on the 2nd of June, 2016, Warrant Officer Kevin Conway will be taken home to Australia from the gravesite he has occupied for the last 52 years in Singapore, the Commonwealth Cemetery. Then on 6 June, Kathy will bury Kevin with his family in Brisbane. May he rest in eternal peace. The two remaining soldiers of valor of 726 I have saved for my closing remarks. Both were awarded the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously. They're the only ones that made the ultimate sacrifice at Nam Dong on our team. Master Sergeant Gabe Alamo, Team Sergeant, who at the age of 45 was our oldest member. He was a native of New Jersey, a veteran of World War II in Korea, He was a jolly and gentle, while at the same time a no-sense, nonsense, gruff trooper. Pop, as we respectfully refer to him, was badly burned and mortally wounded at Nam Dong. He died in my arms, what we later called the death pit. Sergeant John Houston, a tall string bean of a guy from Fort Knox, Kentucky. He was only 22, but had already served 5 years in the Army. At the Battle of Nam Dong, John ran, jumped, and darted from mound to mound, making the Viet Cong and NVA attackers think that he was more than one. But up against 800 to 900, as well as to have to put up with those that infiltrated our outer and inner perimeters, he was gunned down. It was ironic that only Alamo and Houston had wives that were pregnant. Both wives went into premature labor upon hearing the news that their husband had been killed in action. Mrs. Alamo's baby died. Mrs. Houston's had twins. It was the night before the battle that John shared with me. He got a letter from Alice informing him that they were going to be proud parents of twins. And yes, during the battle, I asked God, why John, why not me? Young John died at birth and is interred at Arlington with his father. Some years later, when Norma and I had a reunion with the team, as we have time to time, the surviving son, George, joined us. During that evening of getting to know and share young George, he shared with us something I'll never forget. He said, you know, I just didn't lose my dad in Vietnam. I lost my brother. I share that, not as new for any of you, but to remind every one of us as we continue to learn that the wounds of war, the casualties of war, go far beyond the battlefield. We have an obligation to treat all the wounded, at home and abroad. As you can deduce, I've always been extremely proud of 726. Every man responded without hesitation, again and again, in a superhuman effort that ultimately was successful in preventing the camp from being overrun. Their upbringing at home, in their churches, by their coaches, their military training, their discipline, their ingenuity, their integrity, their courage, as individuals and as members of a team, they all been put to a severe test. One of the severest a soldier could face. Yet without orders, each man of the team functioned perfectly, and we proved ourselves a fighting unit. Nam Dong then, Nam Dong now. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. May God continue to bless all of you. I have with me tonight one copy of a book which captures the return to Vietnam. This was published by Children's Library International. The one picture that's captured on the cover is burned into my heart and soul. Is a strapping Special Forces soldier marching in front of Sergeant John Houston's coffin at his funeral, carrying the baby coffin of his son. Every generation is called on to sacrifice. It's up to us to continue to make them strong, so when they're called upon, they will sacrifice and perform with honor. Thank you for the privilege to be with you tonight, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions or engage in conversation with any one of you, as long as you want to stay. Norma gave me the night off. Let me close by sharing what Norma engraved in my wedding band 48 years ago. So when I make the final roll call, they will find these words engraved upon my heart. What we are is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God. Thanks again. God bless you all.
Comments or questions, please?
That's great. Thank you very much for the privilege to be with you.
Well, this may seem a little trite, but Roger, you have left us breathless with your presentation. If you've not read either or both of Colonel Donlon's earlier books about the experience of his team, his experience in Vietnam, I encourage you to. AUSA does not have the books for sale. However, I am privileged to have both books that I bought a number of years ago in our home library. I reviewed them over the last couple of days, getting ready for tonight. All I can say from my review and earlier reading is that in your remarks, all members of your team were here tonight. There's one black and white photo that captures all members of your team. And in my remembrance and my reminiscences from reading them and then listening to your wonderful presentation tonight, you and your Green Berets were standing up in front of us. And your remarks tonight, oh, there wasn't an image, it was in my mind. And your remarks tonight honored the living and brought those who have passed on back to life with making them part of your distinguished service. So thank you, and Norma, thank you very much for taking care of Roger over all these years. I know it's been a work of love and not a task or an endurance. Thank you all again for attending the AUSA commemorative event tonight, as we are as a Vietnam commemorative community. You'll see some additional events as our participation coming up in our annual meeting in October, and we'll have several unscheduled lectures to be identified in the future of lectures like this. If you are a Vietnam veteran, General Jackson and Sergeant Major Spencer would like very much to make sure that you have got one of the Vietnam veteran medallions that you can wear on your civilian clothing. I'm proud to have one on my suit lapel. So, Command Sergeant Major Jimmy, or General Jim, you may not have them in your pocket, but we're ready to give them out. Again, thank you all for participating tonight. It really makes everybody feel great to be associated with our Army and its soldiers from the past and its soldiers today. Safe travel home. God bless each. Thank you very much. Good night.